Aye, against, thank you, that's carried. Now we come to the Derelict Building Department. And we've got, there we go, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Go for your life.
Thank you. So this report comes out of a resolution from last year for staff advice on the Derelict Buildings Program and expanding that. The report provides information on two options, but just as some context, the current legislative framework restricts what council can do in respect of managing what might be defined as derelict buildings. Derelict buildings as a concept is undefined, and part of the exercise would be to define what a derelict building is. The legislation does define what a dangerous and unsanitary building is and what an earthquake-prone building is, but whether derelict buildings are broader than that, we need to test that. There's legislative tools or sticks, as I call them, that are available for those types of buildings that are defined. But for other buildings, they'd be outside the legislative framework to use sticks. The report outlines some of the methods that we've used in the central city since the earthquake and you'll be familiar with the term Dirty 30 sites and the program of work, which was a suite of tools that collectively got action on the ground, but it remains to be seen what could be achieved in the suburban context. So the advice in the report is that council, the recommended staff position is council doesn't proceed with additional work beyond the status quo, but recognise there is some appetite for action. So if we proceed with further work, we first need to define what a derelict building is, and then carry out an inventory to establish which buildings meet criteria. If there is to be further work, it needs to be geographically focused such that the work is manageable. We can't commit to multiple areas, and the risk is that we have that it becomes bigger than what is possible with the resources available. So we're suggesting a trial, and that the methods are focused on, firstly, engagement with the landowners to facilitate improvement or redevelopment, and that we explore other tools and approaches, including exploring rating as a tool based on what you heard this morning. Okay. Bearing in mind this doesn't have any additional resourcing with it, so we would be diverting resource away from existing programs of work, and at this stage for a trial we'd be able to manage that, but anything more beyond that would require additional budget. So we're proposing taking on board the feedback, a trial, but let's test how effective that is before we go broadening this too far.
I'm happy to move the staff recommendation, and Tim is happy to second it. We have some questions from Victoria, is that right? Yep.
Thank you, Mark. A trial, what sort of time period are you looking at, and what's the mechanism that this will come back to us?
So firstly, as a trial, we need to, as I outlined, establish what a derelict building is by definition, and establish which buildings apply, and identify the tools and report back to you. We're proposing to report back after the election when the new council is formed to outline how we intend to advance it from there.
Okay, so
I was just going to add that the amended recommendation has a date there of 28th of February.
Okay, sorry, I hadn't seen that. So how do you actually, what's the word you say? How do you test the definition of a derelict building? What does that involve?
We can look at using examples. We can identify buildings on a spectrum. So there'll be buildings that are vacant for a long period of time that may not require any improvement, but there's a perception that they're derelict because they've been sitting vacant.
Okay, so there's no legislative guidelines for you in that, but as a local authority, we can come up with our own definition. Is that correct? And is that what you're proposing?
That's
Okay.
and effectively that would be to capture anything. Consider what is beyond the definition of a dangerous and unsanitary building, which is defined and has a legislative basis, and what is beyond an earthquake-prone building, and what possible types of buildings would fall into that category based on level of maintenance, condition, and other factors.
Okay, and sorry, the one final question then is, the paper was saying that it wasn't appropriate to extend the barrier sites. So the work that you're proposing is separate and apart to the barrier sites program that you've already got going. This is a new piece of work that you're looking at.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Pauline?
And just to double clarify, and you have with the amendment there that's up, you have the resource to do a trial there with those two specified areas. Is that correct?
We'll make it happen with the current resource, but can't do anything more than that.
Yeah. Thank you. Just wanted to be clear.
Oh yeah, just happy to second the amendment.
You're happy to second the amendment. Celeste had her hand up and then Yanni. Oh, sorry. Yanni.
Yeah, so thank you for the update. I look at the number of complaints we get for like a month for dangerous buildings. You know, February this year we had 2, January 3, December 2, this is going backwards, November 4, October 3, September 5, August 6, July 8. I struggle to understand why within the existing work program we couldn't take a more hands-on approach with that number of complaints. I mean, it doesn't seem like a massive amount of complaints that are coming in terms of the ability to respond in somehow in a improved way.
What you're describing is effectively the current business as usual approach, which is to a large extent reactive. What is being discussed here is a proactive approach of identifying buildings before there's been complaints.
And it is a different group of staff too. That's the compliance area, and includes engineers and people like that go out and assess these buildings. So it would be a different group of people. But I think one of the notes there is that staff come back and do a briefing on the dangerous and unsanitary buildings process and provide councillors with a bit more information there and get some feedback.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. Is it possible within the statistics to get a breakdown of what's residential and what's commercial as well?
Yes, I think that would, because they're quite small numbers. We should be able to do that manually.
So just on that note, sorry, I just can't quite read it from here, but do you think we need to specify residential? I mean, in my area, the biggest complaints are the individual residential buildings that stand alone, and I'm just wanting to know that we can have a good focus on that, where we've spent a lot of time in the past talking about commercial sites, and I understand that they're ISILs as well, but
we could add to the noting provision with a focus on residential, but I don't think we leave out commercial because I think that is a part of it.
right, okay. I think that if people are okay, just to add a note saying including a focus on residential. It's just about the note. So
it's note 2, and it would be adding the words. A briefing is scheduled on dangerous and derelict buildings focused on residential.
yeah, I think that would be helpful.
That covers both residential and commercial buildings.
Residential and commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, residential and commercial. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. And so that, I mean, effectively, the current legislative framework, there's a lot of regulation around what we can't do effectively around the property rights. Is that effectively what's the biggest handbrake at the moment around taking more timely action?
It's quite specific how a building has to be assessed. So we send an engineer or an environmental health officer to assess the building, and it really depends what comes back from that assessment. If the engineer says it's dangerous, then we can move to the next step. If they say it's not dangerous, then we can't categorise it as a dangerous building.
You'd be happy for us to put in like areas of concern ahead of the briefing, so that when we had the briefing, they could
Certainly happy to
be looked at.
Yeah,
And the only other question I had was, in terms of working with FENS, would that be a suitable partner to also have at the briefing, just so we can get that kind of combined look at?
We can explore that, and if appropriate, we can include them in the briefing. I know FENS do look at the dangerous buildings as well. We do sometimes involve them in the assessment.
Okay, righto. Mel, then back.
In the Act about the dangerous, affected or unsanitary buildings, it says what territorial authorities may do, and talks about, which I haven't read, section 1251, about requiring work to be carried out on the building to reduce or remove the danger or prevent the building from remaining insanitary, which is more than just putting a fence around. Does that give council actual powers to do something, or is there limits in this Act? Because if we do have the powers to do things, I think we should be doing more, and if we don't, we should be going to central government to get that Act fixed.
Yes, so sorry I haven't got the Act in front of me, but
for a building that's deemed dangerous, so just a plain meaning of the term dangerous and sanitary is where there's an immediate threat to people or property warranting immediate action. And powers that we have under the Act include prohibiting occupation of the building, requiring the owner to take steps to reduce or remove the danger, or in an emergency to take action itself to make a building safe, as in council taking action to make it safe if there's an emergency risk.
But if no one's occupying the building, this is the thing, isn't it? And this is the part that nobody really thinks seems very logical, I suppose, is that if a building is completely insanitary, if we chuck a fence around it and say you can't go there, then otherwise that's totally fine.
So the threshold is higher for evidence, so typically would require an expert engineering assessment. So, I mean, there is the option for council to lobby central government, but it may not be a priority.
yeah. And coming back to your point, yes, they can make a building safe by restricting access to it. And I think Antonio Hall for a while has been like that, where they've fenced off the site. The building itself is dangerous, but they've restricted access to the site.
Yeah, so you're making something safe by getting around it.
Yes, by fencing, for example.
I do know if August 2024, LGNZ proposed to pursue the matter with government with a view to tightening of requirements, but I can't comment where that's got to, but perhaps we can touch on that in the next briefing.
Well, as we're not part of that,
No,
it
no.
might be good for us to do something individually. Hey?
Again, that briefing that is proposed before June could be an opportunity to explore that further.
Victoria?
Look, I note that this has come up specifically with reference to New Brighton, given that there does appear to be a proliferation of derelict buildings here. I wonder, from your staff perspective, is it a help or a hindrance to be site-specific in this recommendation with the next piece of work you're doing?
I think through our partners, we have an understanding of different buildings in New Brighton such that we can narrow it down quite quickly. And also given the fact there's a lot of activity happening in New Brighton, such that it will narrow down in terms of sites without being specific here.
Tyrone?
So when the derelict or unsanitary building is a council-owned building like Kukapa Hostel or Jeannie's Cottage in Akaroa or Donald Street Stables or the garage at Steadfast Reserve, what options are open to council to be able to sort of act quickly on those, or if there is no budget or an unwillingness in the community to repair them?
So these are council-owned buildings
Yep.
you're talking about. We probably can't answer that in this discussion.
Okay.
That's for the building owner, whoever's responsible for those buildings.
We could
Yes.
potentially cover that in a briefing with those building owner representatives.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Celeste's got a hand up. Are you? I assume you're moving this. Yes. Yeah, so that's it. Okay. Any?
Do you want me to
You want
move
to
on?
question? You're far away.
Yep. I mean, basically, it's been explained extremely well, so there's probably not too much more to add. The idea is really just to have a very targeted approach. The challenge with derelict buildings is there is actually quite a clear gap in what we can do. So has been touched on, there is actually very limited we can do outside the dangerous and sanitary buildings legislation. So this is just looking at additional measures and getting clarity on what they could be. And then through this very targeted trial, we'll be able to look at where else we can apply this. So because it's very targeted, staff have confirmed that it won't be using too much resource. It just makes sense. And the timing's quite key because we see that there's quite a lot of turnover in the New Brighton area. And what we're saying to the developers that are investing to the area is we're not going to let those that aren't doing anything hold them back, because I think we have a responsibility to show that people have to do the right thing. So this is part of that.
Okay, just one question from me, guys. What your staff recommendation is 99% doing what the amendment's doing, asking anyway, especially with the trial side of things. Is that right, or am I missing something here?
The staff recommendation was to continue status quo, which was principally reactive in response to dangerous and sanitary and earthquake-prone buildings, and continuing our case management service to the extent that that would affect properties. But this is a lighter shade of the alternative option that staff put forward.
Okay. Right. So we should have.
Could we just clarify, Councillor Donovan, is your proposed amendments to add these additional recommendations or to replace the staff recommendations with your ones?
It's instead of.
Replacement, is it?
Yep.
Is it?
That's right.
So 3 and 4 could go of the original recommendations and be replaced with the amendments.
Right. Okay, so that's what your your motion is, Councillor Donovan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep 1 and 2.
Yeah, and leave 4, so replace 3. No, Councillor Coker suggested 4 stay in, did you? Yeah.
4 would, Mayor, I'd suggest 4 needs to be replaced as well, because the last part of 4 notes maintaining the current approach.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay.
Yes, just because if it's a replacement, it's a foreshadowed as opposed to an amendment. Yeah, so it's foreshadowed.
Yeah, foreshadowing. Yes,
Since you're replacing the
whole thing. Okay, so that means we vote on the staff rec, and if that fails, the foreshadowed gets thrown out there.
Yep.
Okay. So, any debate or just thank you, gentlemen.
Well, that's what it's a replacement.
Sorry,
I
no,
was hoping it was an amendment. It's not, it's a replacement. Yeah. Okay.
I've still got 2 questions, so we'll get those out of the way first. Mel, did you have a question?
I would like to ask Councillor Donovan if her amendment could go where 3 is and keep the first 2 resolutions and change number 4 so it ends at the word process, knowing that we need to put on more budget, or it's an option that we could put on more budget. Why would that be a bad thing?
Through you, Mayor, that would be acceptable. Yep.
So question, there's a question to Councillor Donovan. Are you happy with that, Councillor Donovan? And then it becomes an amendment rather than a foreshadowed motion.
So we're just going. Okay.
2 minutes just to.
Righto. So we're moving some of those up into the substantive, are we?
Well, that's, yeah. Are the move and seconder happy to accept that amendment, or do you want?
So just tell me exactly what we're going to do. We're moving the.
Yeah. So Councillor Donovan, is my understanding, now wants to have this as an amendment rather than a foreshadowed motion, and that amendment would be amending the original recommendation to have 1 and 2 there, her new recommendations replacing 3,
and recommendation 4 just being slightly amended.
Finishes that word process.
So three is the one that changes, but so all that other stuff down there doesn't really.
And that's all come up there now.
Right.
So we put Councillor Donovan's amendment first, and if that wins, it stays. If it loses, we go back to the original one.
Okay. Right. Any debate for anyone? Thank you, Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. I strongly support us doing more. One of the real frustrations in my community has just been the problem with derelict buildings just sitting vacant, getting vandalised, attracting a whole bunch of antisocial behaviour, and eventually 9 times out of 10 actually catching fire, putting the neighbours at risk, and then not only once they've been burnt, but often they will stand as a burnt shell. Often they'll have another fire, and eventually, months and months and months later, after the community have been complaining, something may get done in terms of the building finally being demolished and removed. But what's clear in my mind is that it's just not acceptable to have that level of risk in a community for such a long period of time. The current system isn't working. So ways that we can improve the system, I welcome. I look forward to the briefing. I do think that there has been some changes over the last decade with FENS coming on board, and it would be really good to look at what more we could do. I do support the idea of being proactive and working with building owners or property owners to try and find solutions. But where that's not possible, I do think we need to look at some sort of greater degree of regulation so that we get better outcomes for our community, because the status quo is not working in my view. We're particularly as a city, because we were hit by the earthquakes, we do have a number of complicated factors around things like insurance settlement and so forth, and I acknowledge that. But actually, there just comes a time when it's no longer acceptable, I think, for these risks to be continued to be carried by local neighbourhoods, local communities, and local people. So I thank staff for bringing us this report. I'm very much looking forward to the next briefing, and I support doing the trial to try and learn what we can in the meantime.
Mel?
Yeah, I agree. With Yanni, look, there's lots of places all over the city like this where people have a house that's fallen to wreck and ruin. They usually, I don't know where they live. They obviously don't live there. But these places attract rubbish and they just get filled up they are insanitary actually. And I can't understand why people want to own them. Actually, if you own these properties, can you get on and sell them, please? Because they're absolute waste of space. So they could be land that could be used for housing, could be used for some other purpose. It just makes absolutely no sense. I mean, they're an eyesore, but I think that's actually the least of the problems. It's everything else and the other issues that go on around it. If we can do anything to encourage people to want to move on from owning these, then we should do it.
Tyler?
Kia ora koutou. I'm going to go from a Riccarton perspective here, and I want to thank staff and Celeste for adding in the Antonio Hall site. Everyone knows that at the start of when we first got elected, Antonio Hall was one of the biggest things that Riccarton wanted to see changed. They drive past it every single day and they see this big, beautiful, but run down and dangerous building. It's been like that for many, many years, since I was about 2 years old. So seeing any change come forward is a great way forward. When we went through the PC14 stuff and we tried to take out the historical provisions on it, again, you welcomed that, and hopefully you welcome this one too, to be able to enable and help that developer continue to work forward in a way that's pragmatic. And I want to also appreciate point C and point D, which is something that we don't usually see when it comes to council, exploring additional tools, both regulatory and non-regulatory, that may support the objective of C, which is enabling the landowner to do something about it. There's so much bureaucracy in the way that we do things at council and in government, where they've got to try and fight through different layers of not only zoning provisions, but also those bureaucratic tools that we've got in front of us. The talk about the dangerous building itself, Antonio Hall is actually extremely dangerous. The neighbouring communities have been quite worried because there's been 3 arson attacks, and in high winds, the tiles from the top of the building have been flying into their properties and near their windows and doors. So it's been an extremely difficult time because even though the property is gated off, temporarily gated off, it's still dangerous when there's a high wind. So those are the things that we need to start thinking about, and I hope you all support that. Kia ora.
Me. I think for a start we should look in the mirror. We've got the Barbados Cemetery Caretaker's House, and we've got the Woodham Park Caretaker's House, which are derelict. And here we are, we do nothing. I've been quietly asking for a year, how do we go? The Com Board in one particular instance is saying, no, we need to hang on to that and spend an absolute fortune doing it up, which is an absolute waste of time. We should look at our own backyard first and lead by example. Otherwise, we're going out saying to someone, oh, Mr. Landowner, you should chop this down, or you should do this or demolish that. If he hasn't got any money or the will or the way to do it, we're toothless. We can't do anything. So I think the system we've got at the moment is as good as it can get. It's working well, and I don't think that this amendment will make one hell of a lot of difference. Any more debate? Jake?
Just to say, it's just a trial. We might as well do something, see how we go, and if it makes a difference in making the city a nicer, cleaner place, then why not?
Okay. Right, so now I am putting the amendment, which is up there. Okay? It's been moved and seconded, yes. So all of those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. Yeah, that may have lost.
Do you want a division?
No. Okay, so that's passed. Now we move on to the next one.
Do you want it recorded?
No.
Did you want to call division on that one?
We are getting close. Community Support and Partnership Unit update, please.